Kole tule ne makali, kaler kole dishnapele. Kole tule ne makali, kaler kole dishnapele. Receive me on thy lap, O Mother, cast me not at death's door. Receive me on thy lap, O Mother, cast me not at delusion's door. There's so many things in this world that are painful, but they should all cause us to say, receive me on thy lap, O Mother. Let me no longer be wandering in this delusion. God gives us tests, sometimes severe ones. This conversation that I want to read you today begins pleasantly, but it becomes more serious as it goes along. Humorously, the Master once remarked, how clever those great ones were to be born into this world while it was still at peace. Here I had to come at a time when there were 3 world wars. One cannot expect our Master always to speak in abstruse koans. It is important, indeed, to know that our Master could be lightly humorous. He meant the above words jocularly. They weren't really self-pitying or complaining. Yet he was also touching on issues which, to him, were important. For he recognized the period into which he'd been born as a time of great unrest in the world. He wanted us to make an extra effort to live at our center within, and to try hard not to let ourselves be influenced by the emotions and excitement that swirled around us in these times. To him, indeed, the so-called Cold War, the period of time following World War II, was a world war also. He was concerned also about the great tension that had been generated in the world by the determination of the communist bloc to dominate people's understanding. He perceived this attempt as satanic. He spoke very seriously of trials that he saw in store for mankind. Another Holocaust would come, he said, far greater than anything the world had seen so far. No corner of the earth will be safe, he once remarked. In addition, he spoke of a coming depression, which he said would be far greater than that which followed the 1929 stock market crash. I was present in the church in Hollywood one Sunday morning when he spoke, as he often did, of great economic hardships ahead. He urged people to do all they could to simplify their style of living, and even if possible to move out to the country. At one point he interrupted what he was saying to declare with so much force that it seemed almost a shout, "You don't know what a terrible cataclysm is coming." Did he utter these words to underscore the importance of what he'd been saying? Or was he declaring another new threat? The word cataclysm usually implies a natural disaster beyond human control, something geologic or even planetary. Clearly, in any case, he was not holding out the usual olive branch people extend after making dire predictions. He wasn't saying, if people will learn to live together in harmony, then maybe everything will turn out well after all. He was saying, rather, the time has passed for positive expectations regarding the near future. Matters are already out of control. Nothing can be done about them now, though we can always mitigate what comes if we practice spiritual principles. You must provide for your own safety and plan to assist anyone you can. In this context, I've often reflected that his teachings were, in a sense, intended more as a guideline for future times after the world has recovered from the disasters he saw in its more immediate future. He spoke often, in the context of coming economic disaster, of people's need to gather together in what he called world brotherhood colonies. Virtually every time he lectured in public during his last years, he harped on this theme. Elsewhere, I have written much on this subject of world brotherhood colonies. It isn't necessary for me here, therefore, to elaborate on that theme. All that I've written on the subject has been based on his ideas. Here I want only to say that he urged everyone to take this concept very seriously. One Sunday he said, "I was thinking so much last night about world brotherhood colonies that my mind didn't want to meditate. Then I chanted a bit and my mind came back to me." From those few words alone, surely, one can see how deep were his feelings on this subject. It's important to understand that whereas we all want to have positive thoughts, it's good to have positive thoughts, but not to think that that means everything's going to be all right. The positive thoughts mean that God is always with you. You are always with God, and nobody can hurt you because of that truth. But the world will go through much suffering, and you can see it on all sides. There is so much upheaval and so much negativity and so much to be cleared away. It's really a time of war between the forces of light and darkness. It's not a time to sit back and sort of just hope for the best. He was very stern about these things, and he urged us to remember that we need to get away from the cities, which, as Gandhi himself said, they're a disease. They're not the way to live. Too many people crowded together, breeding all sorts of negativity. Get close to the land, where you can build your own home, grow your own food. This is what I would like to do here in India. I've already done it in the West, and I believe that it is the normal and sane way to live. But you see, we're living in an age right now which is an age of conflict and crisis. It's we've already come into, as my Param Guru Swami Kriyananda explained, we've come into Dwapara Yuga. It's not Kali Yuga any longer. If things seem to be getting worse, it's because people are getting more and more confused, but that kind of confusion has to come into a kind of an explosion. We will see that kind. There's a intense confrontation between the forces of evil and light, between the old ways of doing things, the Kali Yuga way of doing things, which sees everything in terms of form, and suddenly the new consciousness of man, which is all toward the flowing energy. This is an age of energy, not of hard form. And there is a conflict between these two ways of seeing things. Always between two yugas, there is a great change of consciousness, and that change of consciousness doesn't come easily. We have been born at a time of great opportunity. I don't want to stress the negative side. I want you to know that is a reality. I want you to know that it's more than a possibility, more even than a probability. It will happen. But I also want you to understand that if you have faith in God, if you live in Him, He will He will protect you. I was going to say He can and will protect you, because the forces of light need in the end to win out. But don't think that we're out of it all now. You see the tensions growing all the time. You know, many years ago, it was a sort of an odd thing. It was after the Second World War, and there was a very great wind that came over Los Angeles. And my guru was with one of his disciples, Sister Durga Mata, and he told her to take her shoe off and hit it 3 times on the porch there at Mount Washington at his headquarters and repeat certain words. He wanted her to do it rather than doing it himself. And the moment that mantra finished, the wind just completely ceased. And in the newspapers the next day, it talked about this very strange and violent wind that all of a sudden, for no reason anybody could understand, was no longer there. But he said that was the karma of World War II. We see this karma. There are more and more earthquakes, more and more explosions of volcanoes, more and more, lots of things happening. And don't think that just because we all have nice homes and so on, that we are not going to go through real hardship financially. I don't know how much India will suffer. You know, when you're jumping from a low table to the ground, you don't hurt yourself. If you jump from a three stories up in a building, you can kill yourself. So America will suffer much more because it will be reduced to the same level, but it will have farther to fall. So it will be very hard in the West. The East will be more adapted to it, but do not expect that these difficulties will not come. It would be good, even on your own, to buy land in the country, and if you can get a few friends together who would like to live a spiritual life, grow your own food, build your own buildings. They can be very simple buildings. You know, when we started our buildings at Ananda, we found very simple ways of construction. I think that it would be easier in India to build them simply than it is there. Building codes are simpler. As I drive down the road here, I see such ramshackle buildings. I know that there cannot be the same kind of rigid building codes that we have in America. You can build simply and still be comfortable. You can grow your own food and be away from the places where there will be the greatest turmoil, which surely would be the cities. There will be great international warfare. It can't be otherwise. You can't just say, oh, nations can keep on hating each other more and terrorists can become more and more active and all blow away. It's unrealistic to think that way. It's something to realize that sooner or later you're going to have to cling to God. He will be your protection. This world will not be your protection. But to live simply, at least, it's not only good for you, it'll set a pattern for other people. You know, during the Depression years in America, there was one township that developed even its own currency. And with that, they were able to carry on perfectly well. They couldn't get a hold of the official currency, but they made this currency, which was of their own creation. They made it work for them, paying people a certain amount for whatever work they did and so on. It would be an interesting thing to study. Another thing that would be important is to get away from paper money. You've seen how the rupee, back when I was here in India in more than 40 years ago, the rupee was more like 8 rupees to the dollar. Now it's way high. It was around 50. Now it's going down because the dollar is going down. But the rupee it just shows what can happen with paper money. Right now, they're printing something like $1.5 trillion in America. What can that result in the end, except just making the country awash with paper money? The dollar won't be worth the money it's printed on. There is going to be a lot of upheaval in that way, economically also. If you can have solid money like silver and gold, this is what money should be based on. But it's no longer based on that. It's based on the promises of a government. How can they fulfill those promises? They're always printing more money. That way they can pay off their debts quickly. But the poor people at the end of the line, the people on pension, for example, old age pension and so on, they get very little in the end. The money becomes worth almost nothing. My guru said that someday, he told a disciple this, I didn't hear him say it myself, but she told me he'd told her that the dollar wouldn't be worth the paper it's printed on. Be prepared for these things. Don't think that it's negative thinking, because positively you should always have faith in God and realize that in the end, even if you have nothing, look at those sadhus up in the mountains. They can live on very little. There was one sadhu who came to the police to report a theft. The policeman said, well, how can you have a theft up there? You're living on that open hillside. He said, well, anyway, describe to me what you've lost. He said, well, I've lost my house, I've lost my overcoat, I've lost my table, I've lost my tablecloth, I've lost... He went on listing these things. He said, well, that seems like an awful lot to be up there on that open hillside. Would you at least describe it to me? Yes, it was a piece of cloth about this big. Well, to him, his cloth was a protection from the rain and snow. It was an overcoat, it was a table on which he ate, and so on. Well, this was sort of a light way of explaining how sadhus have learned how to get along on very little. Indians have learned what Americans have not learned. They can get along on very little. I don't think India will suffer as much, but I do think that the whole world needs to be aware of what is coming, because we've gone too far. The real basis of it all is simply this: too much greed. People think that the more they have of things, the more they'll be happy. Things and the freedom you want through those things, you won't get them. You won't get them by creating a new revolution. You won't get them by living in a beautiful mansion. You won't get them by having power. You'll get them when you can live close to God, close to nature, and enjoy God's presence in your life. Live simple lives. Live closer to nature. This is the urgent need of the day in which we are living right now. Joy to you.
If you're seeking freedom in a revolution, no, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. For once the guns stop blazing, you'll find it amazing how the world can drag on just as before.
If you're seeking freedom in a marble mansion,
oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there.
For even when it's sunny, you'll be counting money, keeping up that showcase, your face lined with care.
And if you're seeking freedom on a throne of power,
oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there.
For though men all obey you, what if they betray you? Tense you'll be and waiting for foes everywhere.
But if you're seeking freedom, cast away desire.
Why barter like a beggar? You've wealth everywhere.
For never can you buy it, grasp and you deny it. Freedom can't be hoarded, it's free as the air. But if you're seeking freedom, seek it on the mountains. God's sunlight on your shoulders, the wind in your hair. For there's no one can hold you, boss about or mold you. Once your heart is free, you'll be king everywhere. Once your heart is free, you'll be king everywhere.